Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the first in a series of webinars to be hosted this year by EMA's Buildings and Construction Practice, based around the theme of workplace design and space planning. Providing information and insights from industry experts, each webinar will cover topics with an eye towards supporting our clients' sales and marketing efforts. My name is Brad Rye. I'm a senior partner with EMA and your moderator for what I know will be a lively and engaging discussion on trends, issues, and influences to watch in workplace design and space planning. Our presenters for today's webinar are Dr. Ishalai Savan, a Senior Associate Research and Strategic Innovation Specialist with HOK's Consulting Group, and Fran Ferrone, Senior Associate Director of Workplace Innovation with the Mancini-Duffy Center for Workplace Innovation. At HOK's Consulting Group, Ishalai is responsible for strategic consulting, real estate development and repositioning strategies, facility management, and life cycle and sustainability consulting. At the Mancini-Duffy Center for Workplace Innovation, Fran helps clients prepare for, communicate, and manage change by aligning company culture with strategic business goals. As Ishalai and Fran go through their information, please do feel free to type in a question as it occurs to you, or you can send a question following their presentation. Ishalai and Fran will respond to questions following their presentation. With that, thank you again for joining us, and I'll turn things over to Ishalai and Fran.
Thank you, Brett. And thank you, everybody, for joining. As Brett mentioned, this is the first of the series, and today, with help of Fran, we'll try to lay the groundwork as to what is the current state of workplace research and trends, and there will be more detailed discussions that will follow in upcoming webinars on various subjects. And because today is about laying a solid foundation, we would like to first start with discussing some of the issues that we are seeing with the workplace research. Similar to what has happened with greenwash, when sustainability was at its peak, where some of the discussions were being undermined through greenwash or excessive use or misuse of some of the terminology, we are thinking that it is also affecting today's workplace research with the overuse of research and studies suggesting just anecdotes and case studies. So we are that's why we are emphasizing the first issue as case studies or being anecdotal and focusing on partial success stories. And the danger of that is when they are just anecdotal or just pinpointing some portion of the story, it is not necessarily giving the audience the ability to replicate such success stories. So we suggest that while telling those stories, we get a fuller picture so that those can actually be more useful and repeatable for our clients. The second issue that we are seeing is the real impact of buildings on people not being quantitative enough. Currently in the building arena, again, due to the peak of sustainability, we are seeing energy, water type of more easily measurable aspects being on the upfront, and human or people side of things not necessarily being measured and being at fault for not being quantitative enough. However, if we introduce the right metrics and begin actually collecting what is meaningful, we can actually get even more return on our investments, and the discussions around people may not be as soft anymore. Related to that, the workspace is complex, but research about it is too simplistic. So what we are seeing is, even though we are dealing with knowledge workers, we don't necessarily go in depth in really understanding what knowledge manager constitutes to, or what kind of information we should be tracking to truly understand the productivity. Again, related to productivity, we are not even measuring productivity in a consistent manner or related to a knowledge manager. It is still very much about just the quantity aspect, not the quality aspect. And we are diving into terms like errors or number of do-overs or work completed on time, but it doesn't necessarily go into specifics as to how that work output impacted the overall bottom line. Again, these are not always readily available or quantifiable, but we need to dig deeper into finding the related metrics and put those out as what needs to be measured. The fifth item is occupant satisfaction studies being inconclusive. These are, as we know, self-reported measures that pretty much gives an idea on what they like, what they don't like, what their needs and preferences are, but they fall short in terms of what really adds value to the organization or what supports task completion or why owners and managers should invest in workspace improvement. Again, they tell a story, but those are partial stories that we need to keep adding on, and as a stand-alone, they don't necessarily help much. And the last one that we will discuss today is the fact that there is real lack of true research and peer-reviewed literature. This goes back to the greenwash comment that I made earlier, where we actually need to find some rigor in the research, and the research and studies that we refer to constantly needs to be non-biased, and they need to be triangulated, and they need to adhere to test of time for it to be valid and repeatable. So in short, what we are saying is there are certain and significant gaps when it comes to workplace research, and as an overall industry, we need to be more aware of these and actually try to overcome and seek out for rigor. Having said that, let's go into some of the research findings that has a lot more rigor into those. And today we will actually be presenting two companies' perspective on similar topics when it comes to research, and hopefully you'll see how they kind of supplement and support each other, which was something that we actually wanted to showcase. So let's start with those workplace trends. The first one that we are seeing in the industry, and we'll go from very high-level generic to more specific items, and first one being the most generic, is the fact that top talent is shrinking. Many large economies, including China, Japan, and the US, face talent shortages as their workforce age and shrink. And here, the two important points is the fact that the workforce is aging and it is shrinking. So the first part is a simple numbers game, really. Unless birth rates or immigration rates change radically, for example, the German workforce is expected to reduce by 25% in 2050. The Italian by 30%, the Japanese by 38%, and in the US, even though the total size of the workforce is expected to grow, the rate of growth will decline from 12% this decade to only 4% between 2010 and 20, and then only 3% between 2020 and 2030, which basically means we won't have a similar number of people to replace the people that will retire in the short term. In order to add to the complexity, we are also seeing skill shortages. So basically, the people that are coming in are not as skilled or as diversified as the ones that are leaving. Based on Sloan Center's research or Harvard Business School Press's research, it shows that in the U.S. only, top skills reported in short supply include management skills, legal skills, sales and marketing skills, operational skills, and technical computer skills. The second trend that we are seeing is the fact that employee engagement matters. In a report issued by Gallup in 2013, State of the Global Workplace, only 13% of the employees across 142 countries worldwide were reported to be engaged in their jobs. And here the term engaged means emotionally invested in and focused on creating value for their organizations every day. And more disturbingly, the reverse, where actively disengaged workers continue to outnumber engaged employees at a rate of 2 to 1. For United States and Canada combined, this number goes down to 1.6 to 1. So basically, while they are getting the paychecks, they actively are working against their companies or being potentially hostile to their organizations. So even though these numbers can be quite disturbing, the good news is as you gain more and more employee engagement, you actually have the ability to improve your company's bottom line as much as 19%. That's why we are saying employee engagement matters. The next trend is the fact that remote work is on the rise. On the public or private sector, what we are seeing is at all times 1/3 of the employees are working remotely, which also means if you have assigned workspaces for your individuals, they are pretty much 30 to 40% at a minimum utilized at all times, and the rest they are going vacant. With that, I'd like to pass it on to Fran for similar stats that they are seeing in their own research.
Well, our research completely concurs with this, and in fact, in this past year, we kind of based it on the hypothesis of the dissolution of traditional workplaces. Seemingly contradictory to this, however, currently the average U.S. worker spends more time working than any other economically evolved country. And while we know that the lines have already begun to blur between work and personal life, and this is due in part to the proliferation of mobile technologies and increasing use of contract workers in the workplace, for the most part, people who are spending time in the office are working in spaces that have not really changed significantly since the mid-20th century. But within a short 10 years, all this is really going to change. Within 10 years, millennials will occupy 75% of the workplace. For the last several years, they have largely tolerated the workplace as it is, in part due to a sluggish economy, but working right behind them will be Generation Z, who will not tolerate that. So we think a big sea change is ahead, and this could mean a pink slip for 9 to 5, as we know it currently. So when we started our research, we really wanted to ask respondents what times of the day they felt most productive. And our findings resulted in some distinct patterns that we think might give us some ideas about how we might use space very differently. And in doing so, these could at once be more attractive to younger generations and help attract people to the workplace, and also help to manage space more effectively. So the first aha we had was that there were some clear peaks of productivity reported in terms of hours of the day. So you're looking at the dotted line all the way across that top. The gray dotted line is showing emails. They are constant throughout the day. And meetings, pretty much, that's the dark blue line that you see kind of peaking in the late morning and mid-afternoon times. But the big blue humps, they are the kind of camel's back, is showing some morning and afternoon peaks of productivity. So the beginning of the day from 8 to 10 a.m. and at the end of the day from 4 to 6 p.m. So we also wanted to look at what tasks were being performed during these self-reported times of productivity. So the circle on the right here shows how these tasks break down, and pretty much what you would expect: phone calls, conference calls, email, so getting things out of the way, moving things along, as well as concentrated work and just plain old-fashioned thinking. Interestingly, if you look at the circle on the left, this is not looking at just the most productive hours as reported, but what a typical day looks like. And you see the pattern is pretty much the same, so not just during productive hours, meaning that 76% of the work performed on any given day, a typical day, is solo or virtual work. And, that's pretty much work that could be performed anywhere given the right technology and, of course, an accepting company culture. So we also wanted to look at patterns in terms of days of the week. And once again, emails are constant. If you look at that heavy gray line in the middle of this graph, you see Monday through Friday, heavy email traffic. But then we looked vertically. We looked at Monday, that top row there, Monday, heads down work, Friday, heads down work. And then we looked at the second line there with the heavy gray line, scheduled meetings, middays, meaning that Mondays are for planning, Fridays are for cleanup, and meetings are for midweek. And I think that really tells us a lot about how we might be planning the workplace as opposed to the way we are currently planning the workplace, which is, is planning as if people are going to be in the office at all times. So this is a matter, it's not just a matter of either or, but really both and. Meaning that we need to offer workers some choice about whether or not they work remotely, and at the same time we need to make a compelling place for them to come to. And this is not double dipping by any means, but it really is kind of a trade-off. So by significantly reducing the percent of assigned space, we can reassign that space to more flexible settings that can serve dual or multiple purposes. And done right, this could be a net savings on real estate and create some greater efficiencies to accommodate growth in the future. We're also talking about agility, and that means giving people choices. We're going to show you some space types that support this concept in a minute. But in order to accomplish this mobility inside the office and outside the office and agility, we have to really start thinking about the planning process, rethinking the planning process. And if you don't think that there's excess space to be had out there, just try walking the floors during different periods of the day to see what percentage of seats are filled at any given time. So some of the ideas that we're toying with at this time is, in addition to allowing the employees options to work from home, perhaps designating certain times of the day as quiet hours or spaces within the office as quiet spaces. We're also asking clients to look more closely at their adjacencies. If the majority of workers perform heads down or virtual tasks during most of the day, do departments really have to sit together? Or could there be common areas large enough for teams to gather when needed? So consider places like cafes, lounges, or arena-type spaces that could do double duty or perform multiple functions.
Thank you, Fran. So when we are talking about choices, choice also relates to flexibility, and flexible work positively impacts engagement and satisfaction, as we referred to earlier. So what we are seeing in numbers is only 10% of employees with low access to flexibility seem to be engaged to their work. And we have the ability to increase that number to even 19 or 10% by increasing those access levels to moderate or high levels. And again, on the flip side, what we are seeing is of the employees that have access to high flexibility, 71% of them are unlikely to look for a new job. But when their access to flexibility drops, that number also tends to go down to 61 or even 45%, depending on the level of flexibility, going to moderate or low levels. The other trend that we are seeing is activity-based work settings are on the rise. And what we mean by activity-based settings is that especially for knowledge workers, a single all-purpose workstation is no longer sufficient. So if we give the example from our own homes, obviously you cook in the kitchen, eat in the dining room, sleep in your bedroom, or brush your teeth in the bathroom, and those might not be the only activities that take on in those particular spaces, but you are equipped to do whatever is needed in those particular areas. So the design of the spaces according to the activities that will take place in, but they are also varied, and there are choices as to where you may do one over the other. So the idea of activity-based office settings also follows a similar premise, where the design allows for a variety of spaces to accommodate the range of specialist activities that will take on those places. And the fact of the matter is, one size does not fit all. So it is prudent to understand the organization, the culture, and the work differences between employees to adequately create those activity-based spaces and variations. The next trend is about buildings and the fact that they can dramatically increase and decrease productivity. So what we are seeing is the building itself can improve the performance of individuals up to 12.5%, or hamper it down to 17%, which as an absolute sense is a range between 30%, which again obviously is a huge mark that you have the ability to control, and when controlled can play a huge role on the individual's productivity and the bottom line of an organization. So how you can actually change that is through some of those factors. Again, daylight matters, acoustic, which I'll cover later on, matters. The indoor air quality matters, or how you design the space matters. So many of these actually contribute, but we are not doing a very good job of consistently measuring those so that they are not seen as soft metrics anymore. So some of the metrics we are seeing are from varied industries, but specific to office. Let me give you some stats. For example, increased daylighting in the workplace design is linked to a 15% reduction in absenteeism in the office environment. Or increasing illuminance levels are mostly argued to have between 2.8 to 20% productivity increases, depending where you are starting in terms of baseline. Or biophilia, as many of you might have heard, the active and passive contact with nature is proven to positively impact the well-being of your individuals and of your employees. So all these do matter, and we need to do a better job of capturing the actual metrics. And it is not just the studies, but the individuals themselves feeling that this really matters. So this is a quote from a client of ours where the percentages are staggering. 91% of respondents believe the quality of the work environment is important to their health and well-being. So even that perception actually do wonders to their productivity in the workplace. The next trend that we'd like to cover is investment in acoustics is worthwhile. These numbers, the 27% improvement in productivity for complex tasks was achieved through white noise or sound masking implemented in work environments on multiple occasions, and that number even increased to 28% improvement when only dealt with simple tasks. So here the idea is that acoustics do matter. Obviously the only solution is not sound masking or white noise, but in order to reduce unwanted noise, we need to take care of the office layout, pay attention to materials used in the floor, walls and ceiling, and behavioral protocols all play a huge role. So we need to understand that acoustics are a key contributor to work performance and well-being in the workplace, and we need to, as Fran suggested a couple slides ago, we need to provide the ability to find quiet times and places in the workplace, and we can overcome many of these issues and provide a better environment for all. With that, again, I'll turn it to Fran.
So all of these statistics that Isla has shared with you are really net positive gains, not only in terms of building savings, but on human activity and productivity. And all of this is wonderful and usually part of a client's initial wish list and even part of the build-out. But what happens when the company needs to accommodate growth or change? I'm sure you've all heard the term densification. We call it the big squeeze. And this is really a compromise to everything and all involved. And it's pretty much it's pretty much the rule rather than the exception. I would say the only exception is really a Google, who might buy a building knowing that it's just going to fill up organically. But aside from from Google or other like-minded companies, pretty much clients are unwilling or reluctant to pay for growth. Typically, space is built out with only a modicum of allowance for expansion, which really means that we have to start planning differently. So any unexpected increase in headcount, and the first things to go are not all the nice ancillary spaces, often taking with them the daylight access, compromising acoustics and certainly air quality as well. So, we understand the realities of business, and we're not necessarily advocating that clients take more space than they need, but again, just start to think of the planning process a little bit differently. And in order to do that, we really have to look at two parts of the equation. And for the most part, the emphasis has been on the real estate part of the equation, and the more important investment and more costly investment is really on the human capital.
Thank you, Fran. And that's why, if nothing else, we like you to take this point from this presentation, that the people are the most important metric. So when we are looking at a company's operating costs, as you all know, 90% and sometimes even more of it is actually related to the human resources. And when we are looking at the financial losses due to absenteeism or presenteeism, which stands for being in the office but necessarily 100% performing due to health problems or personal issues, those combined seems to be at an average rate of 4% productivity loss for most organizations. So investing in your people and doing the design or highlighting the design trends that we just mentioned, you have the ability to actually improve the staff performance. And by doing so, you can pretty much cover all the real estate or operation and maintenance costs that you are investing into the building. And it only takes 2 to 5% increase in your staff performance to cover the whole real estate or operation and maintenance costs. Again, which is very staggering given the fact that our focus to date has generally been on the building itself or the facility without doing the strong linkage between the fact that facilities are there to support the people. So we better invest in the people. And the ratio that you are seeing there is actually a good one to remember. 1, 10, and 100. 1 stands for the energy cost, 10 stands for your real estate cost, and 100 stands for the people cost for many organizations. Again, this is a tested ratio, and it kind of showcases the impact and where you should invest, and once invested, what kind of a result it may produce. Again, this is another study that provides these are self-assessments, but even with these self-assessments, what is suggested is, as for each 15% increase in workplace satisfaction, for each employee, you can expect a 1 to 4% increase in productivity. Again, going back to the previous, where up to 2 to 5% individual performance increase could cover all real estate costs. So what we are pretty much targeting is a 15% increase in workplace satisfaction from your employees. And once achieved, you are pretty much covering all your other costs. Fran?
So not to complicate things, but there are some differences between generations. So when we're looking at people, we have to look at this the same way that Ishalai talked about. One size does not fit all in terms of spaces, and it certainly is the case with different generations. So what you're looking at here is what we call our IP gap, or a gap between things that are thought to be most important by employees but performing not so well. So looking at the black part of the graph here, we kind of clustered baby boomers and traditionalists together, and we saw, you know, pretty much for them, the job is the job. There weren't a lot of big differences or big gaps here, but the two that stood out were time to exercise, which is really in keeping with, across all generations, a whole new awareness of the importance of health and well-being. But the second one is access to colleagues, which kind of begs an interesting opportunity here for creating these common spaces that can help people cross-pollinate ideas, make for serendipitous interaction, and also mentoring, not only of the older generations to the younger generations, but reverse mentoring. So having the younger generations really bringing the others up to speed on what's current. So that's looking at boomers and traditionalists. And then when we started to look at Gen X and Gen Y, we saw some very large gaps here. Exercise certainly is number one. The other is a desire for downtime between projects, taking breaks throughout the day periodically, and last but not least, and kind of feeding into the whole idea of pink slip for 9 to 5, is having a choice on which days people work. So when we're talking about the attract and retain issues that Ishalai began with, we're really seeing here that even though employers are pretty much still expecting 9 to 5 and 24/7, that freedom could be the new currency. But, as it stands, employees aren't even entirely getting the actual breaks from the workplace to which they're entitled. A survey conducted recently by Harris Interactive for the career website Glassdoor found that of the 2,300 American workers they surveyed, only 51% of paid vacation time and paid time off for which workers were eligible was actually used. Our study also looked at this, and what we found here is an astonishing 52%, so more than half of our respondents said that they check and respond to email and even take phone calls all or most of the time that they're away. So here's an idea. With very little or no downtime, even when you're on vacation, and no way to really get away from the office, what if we start bringing some vacation into the office, or at least some sources of inspiration and relaxation into the workplace landscape? So we're going to just show you a couple of examples of what that might look like. First, the use of color. And overwhelmingly, this is like a really most want on when we're asking people about design or physical characteristics. Art and color, the same things that make them matters of individual taste, can make them unifying factors. And not only can they be conversation starters, but they can be elements that say something about your team, your company, or your culture. Access to outdoors, and if you don't have the luxury of that, then just access to nature or having a view from the office. It's like the old saying, a change is a rest. Having access to views in nature are elements that divert people without actually distracting them. Great way to restore focus and foster creativity. And, many people, especially in urban areas, do not have access to outdoor settings within the office, but how about a little change of policy, like when we were talking about quiet hours or quiet spaces throughout the day? How about, taking a meeting outside, have a walking meeting, just change it up a little bit, take a meeting to a park if it's available. Then we're seeing an awful lot of requests for these town hall spaces, which are great event spaces for within a company. They also can help offset the costs of creating them by being, revenue generators for outside the organization. But these spaces really do double duty as well. I mean, this is a great way to get away from your desk and do some heads down concentration. Really great way to have an informal meeting, just kind of hangout space. This I would consider, this is a little bit of an ad hoc space. It could serve multiple purposes, but again, it would fall into the lounge or library category, could even fall into the category of a meditation space. A lot of talk recently with the book about introverts versus extroverts, about quiet rooms. And, this is Quiet Rooms 2.0, not just for introverts, but for anyone needing a space to put their feet up and just regenerate with impunity. According to a 2009 Ohio State University study, meditation in the workplace can lower a company's health care costs by reducing chronic stress, which is, of course, a major risk factor for illness. Cafes, a lot of focus on food now, and organizations in the last 20 years have really moved away from providing in-house food services, but now we're seeing some organizations, especially in campus settings, moving back towards that, or we're also seeing that this is an amenity that developers are putting into shared office spaces. And even if there is no actual food service, just having a place to go where that's not at your desk, to eat a sandwich, read a book, have a conversation, a great way for more informal interaction. And then more formal cafe spaces. Also, this is a great example of a space that could do double duty. So these are touchdown spaces for people who come into the office infrequently. Great places for ad hoc or informal meetings that kind of free up conference room space that's largely overbooked a great deal of the time. And gaming areas, not everyone can afford the cost or the space of creating a video room or a rock climbing wall, but, there are more modest investments like just a simple ping pong table that could be created. Exercise areas is another big item on the list of nice to haves for employees, and it's kind of backed up with some pretty amazing statistics. Insurance giant Aon says that employers can expect a $3 to $6 return on every dollar spent on wellness programs. And at the same time to exercise, which ranked so importantly on our survey, is something that is really a personal priority. So the kind of sum here is that these spaces would be integral to the facility. They would not be nice to have spaces that would disappear at the first sight as a sign of growth or change. So this also, of course, means an upfront investment in terms of building up infrastructure more than we might typically do. So you might be looking at putting power where it might not have been before, beefing up the capacity like we have to do on trading floors. It would entail wireless plug-and-play abilities to recharge without plugging in, but just by proximity to the power source. Demountable walls, again, an upfront investment, but big on the back end, big returns in terms of flexibility. Looking at air handling differently, sprinkler redundancy, so you don't have to go into the ceiling every time you want to change those walls. And then, of course, understanding code capacity in terms of restrooms. So again, this all goes into the planning process, but with some opportunity for some great returns on the back end. So giving people these kinds of choices really provides a lot of opportunity, not just for employers and employees, but also for ourselves as service providers. Understanding how not only the workplace trends that we're talking about, but the business challenges that influence them can certainly enhance your role as a service provider. Asking more questions about what companies are doing to accommodate change and growth. What are they doing to attract talent or promote their culture? How are they supporting employee health and well-being? These are new kinds of conversations that can really help you promote different types of products at the right time and place. Kind of clicked a little too quickly, but the last one I wanted to say is, the trends that we're seeing are Wi-Fi throughout the office, technology agnostic furniture, so things that are not dependent on specific technologies because it changes so often, any kinds of furniture or equipment related to food-oriented amenities, town hall spaces, lounges, gaming areas. These are, and of course outdoor spaces. These are all really new areas of focus that really have nothing to do with the traditional cube, private office, or conference room fit out. So how do we get there? Well, I think with more experimentation. Workplaces need to be fluid. It's really not like building your dream house that you plan to live in forevermore. It's really a place that is meant to change as it needs to change, and we can't be afraid of that change.
Thank you, Fran. And because we so frequently are talking about change, our last point is about the importance of managing change. What we are seeing is change management can indeed dramatically impact project success, and per ProSize benchmarking studies, it is arguably you can affect the success of change 6 times more if you have a active, solid change management plan. And when we are talking about change management, we are not only talking about communication, but also gaining buy-in, engagement, listening, and hearing the employees so that you can potentially break down resistance from all levels. Resistance from senior management through mid-management and employee level is showcased as the number one obstacle against project success or meeting the project objectives. And this doesn't necessarily mean failing, but not necessarily achieving the full benefits of the project that you are enrolling So there is always ability to maximize the benefits, and through displayed or implemented change management, you have the ability to increase the benefits for the employees so that there is more return on the investment. So these were the points that we wanted to discuss for today. You certainly have the opportunity to look for more of these workplace trends and research published on our websites, where you are seeing the links or our contact information. And I believe now it is the time for any questions that you may have that hopefully we can respond to. Back to you, Brad.
Great. Thank you very much, Ishalai and Fran. Really enlightening and thought-provoking information. We do have a couple of questions. Many of our clients are manufacturers of products that are either interior in nature for corporate interiors, or infrastructure in nature, things like HVAC systems, lighting control. So based on the research that you shared with us today and your experience in the market, Ishalai as a specifier yourself, what advice would you have for our manufacturing clients in terms of how they should be marketing their products? Again, whether it's lighting control systems, HVAC systems, furniture, flooring, ceiling tiles, and I guess I'm really thinking about performance versus what these products might enable to achieve the type of workplace that you're identifying as so important. So it's really, I guess, a marketing and a messaging question based on the data.
Absolutely. Fran, I'll bring it back to you as well, but I would respond to the data side. It needs to be evidence-based. Whatever we are putting forth needs to be evidence-based and tested for validity, so that we can actually argue certain benefits, not on an anecdotal basis, but with a full foundation as to why it worked, where it may not work, giving that full flavor of where it can and where it may not work is actually very beneficial and builds the trust that is very much needed in the industry. Again, let's be aware of what happens with greenwash and try to get or avoid that in the workplace arena when we are arguing productivity or ability to increase individuals' performance and such. So those arguments, if made loosely, can also return as reducing the credential or believability. Fran, do you have any additional points?
No, I just would add to that. I completely agree, and it's about it has to be evidence-based, but unfortunately it may be anecdotal evidence. But I think we have some really compelling metrics very, very early on here, where, say, sustainability metrics took years to develop. I think that this focus on health and wellness is huge, and there are some very compelling metrics that are in the public domain that can be used to promote a cause for looking at spaces differently and encouraging people to work differently. The other thing that I might add here is that along the lines of experimenting more, is that as suppliers, if we offer to do pilots, just to create our own kind of little test center within an organization, just to, see how some of these new space types and products actually perform. Oftentimes, when these types of pilots are put in, everybody wants one. It just kind of spreads throughout the organization more organically than it would when imposing a new workplace standard within a project.
And one more thing, Brad, before moving into the next question, I'd like to emphasize that anecdotal is not necessarily a bad thing, but we need to make the story a full story, kind of giving some more information or in-depth information as to the additional environment or surrounding, so that we can have a better understanding of what might have worked for that individual case study. And also spicing best case studies or findings with worst case can also help. Again, seeing what may or what may not work.
Got it. Thank you. A question around engagement. One of the striking statistics, Ishalai, that you shared with us was it was a low double digit, I think 13% of workers who say that they feel engaged on the job. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what that means to be engaged. Is that engagement among colleagues, engagement with technology to better do their work, and what are some of the simple and maybe more complex things that employers can do from a design standpoint to really enable that engagement that seems to be lacking, but as your statistics show, once it's there, has a strong influence on productivity and the bottom line.
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. This is, as I mentioned, is a extraction from a Gallup report, which is titled State of the Global Workplace. And if you go to that full report, there is even segmentation per countries and per industries, which may give a full flavor. Right now, I took the most striking, which is a worldwide stat. And in this case, when we are talking about employee engagement, what we are focusing on is really the people being emotionally invested in and focused on creating value for their organizations every day. So it is really kind of understanding what the organization is about and doing their bit in order to affect the bottom line. And the other stat that I shared was their individual ability to actually make a difference up to 19% to the bottom line. So obviously engaging employees do definitely pay off, and how that can be achieved is doing the design or the changes that we just discussed, not for real estate or space reduction reasons, but because it should be important for the employees. And how you start off a study or how you actually go about a project definitely tells quite a lot to the employees. So if your goal is to reduce space, again, even though you may not necessarily emphasize it or say it or kind of try to twist it, people do notice. So what should matter is your people, and if the project goal in the heart is actually establishes that fact, it will definitely pay off and hopefully will help employees be more engaged. Fran, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think, what you're saying is that employees are smart. They know when you're trying to squeeze the last square foot out of a space. So why not be upfront about it, but put it in a more personal way. We're doing this so that we can save 10 jobs, and one of those jobs might be yours. And that's not necessarily putting a fear factor into the mix, but really making it more human. But if you do take something away, you've got to give something back. And, space can only do so much. This has to be more of a cultural and operational kind of mindset where, you will give people some choice and some flexibility about when and where they work, outside or inside the office. And then inside the office, a lot of engagement is really supported by just visual accessibility, knowing people who's there, being able to see them, access to people that they need to see, and creating kind of a sense of buzz.
Got it. And then our last couple of minutes, one more question. We see the office furniture market, for example, starting to really pick up steam. Curious, any insight into any verticals, any sectors that do the things that you're talking about really well, whether technology or healthcare? Are there any types of companies that you think are really progressive in some of these areas that we could look to as examples and maybe opportunities for selling and marketing based on the data you've shared with us today?
You mean client companies? Are you talking about manufacturers in terms of?
I'm talking about some of the end user examples that you cited that are doing things well. Is there a particular sector that seems to have embraced some of these approaches that you talked about?
Well, professional services, I think, are at the bleeding edge. I mean, and I'm not saying that that's where everybody needs to go, but in terms of utilization, I would say that, you know, the accounting firms are probably at the extreme end, you know, given the type of work that they do, which is still somewhat of a mix of people who are client-facing and not in the office and people who are in the office all the time. So, you know, the technology industry is obviously on the lowest end of the scale in terms of or has the highest utilization rate and lowest square foot per person and more mobility, but I would say professional services are right behind them.
Great. Well, that concludes our hour together. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Just one more to add a more. There's a upcoming research that IFMA and HOK will put forth in terms of distributed workplace and who is the leaders and who might be lacking and what it might mean for different industries. So if that is of interest, please watch out for an upcoming research report through IFMA. We should be available in end of July, the latest.
Excellent.
Again, so keep in touch, and there will be more information on that.
Okay, we'll make a note of that and keep an eye out for it. Well, that concludes our presentation from Fran and Ishalai today. Thank you very much, Fran and Ishalai, for all of that very helpful and insightful information. The presentation that Fran and Ishalai went through today will be posted on our website, and we also will be sending out a link to everyone who joined us by phone today so that you can access it that way. So again, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll be in touch shortly about our next webinar. Have a good afternoon.